Welcome, everyone, to the hidden truths around Oracle databases and database market trends. It seems like a hot topic, judging by the number of attendees we've got for today's webinar. First, we need to let you know that there will be some forward-looking statements subject to change over time. And with that, I'm Dan Ashton. I've been with Romini Street for 7 years next month, and I head up our marketing efforts around Oracle, SAP, IBM, and Microsoft databases, along with our strategic services, including security, interoperability, and licensing. So let's dive into some of the database market trends. As new applications are moving to the cloud, data and analytics obviously are going to follow. Cloud database continues to accelerate, and Gartner notes that it's only in about 2 years that 75% of all databases are going to be in the cloud. So it's not surprising that cloud deployed revenue is way up at the expense of customer deployed databases. With Amazon and Microsoft, they're topping that cloud service provider list. Now, part of that includes increased usage of more than one cloud provider, multi-cloud, right? So this can be advantageous, but one caveat that I guess we'd like to pass on to folks is to make sure that you're looking at the total cost of ownership. Having several cloud providers can be beneficial in terms of cost or other services, but it also requires your staff to be familiar with multiple systems, and sometimes the input-output costs of moving data around can creep up on you. So to take a holistic view of that if you're looking to use multiple cloud providers. Now, here's where things get really interesting, at least in my opinion. Commercial databases, of course, those with a license fee, are struggling in popularity as open source database market is exploding. And this is a graph from database engine or dbengines.com. Now, Gartner also predicts that in the next couple of years, more than 70% of all new house applications are going to be based on an open platform, and half are going to migrate from existing commercial databases. Of course, this is being driven by the maturity of the open source databases, which today in many respects are pretty much on par with commercial databases for functionality. Now, in our recent Romini Street survey, which we're going to go into in detail in a few minutes, 41% of Oracle database customers are actively looking to reduce their Oracle database footprint. And that's driven primarily by the high cost of Oracle database. So where are they going? According to dbengines.com, which I just mentioned before, there are more than 340 databases on the market. So there's plenty of choices. And of course, it all depends on your requirements. Now, when it comes to open source options, the three most popular in dbengines.com are MySQL, Postgres, and MongoDB in that order. Now, not surprisingly, according to our Romini Street survey, it's the same top 3 databases that are specifically not just being chosen, but companies that are migrating from Oracle. It's these same 3, with MySQL and Postgres leading the pack, followed a little bit further behind by MongoDB. Now, of course, there's some tried and true options. Oracle continues to hold on to its #1 position. We've got nothing bad to say about Oracle database as a database. It's rock solid. It has few problems. And of course, some of the chief competitors are IBM, Microsoft, and of course, a family of different SAP databases. Now, these are products that Romini Street supports, and we are looking at supporting an open source database or open source databases sometime probably later this year. But again, that's a forward-looking comment. We're not necessarily making a commitment to that, but it's something we are definitely looking at. Now, for those who can't or don't want to migrate from one of these, away from one of these industry standards, we're going to talk about other cost savings options in a second. But first, is open source for everyone or everything? You can't use open source databases just for any application. For example, Oracle and SAP ERPs aren't going to run on open source. They have very specific products that they are certified to run on, along with a lot of other enterprise applications. That's why Gardner, in that previous slide, is suggesting that most folks would probably want to begin with some new applications that you're either building or onboarding that are going to accept the idea of open source. Now, security might also give you some pause, especially being that you would be dependent typically on a community to provide patches. And there absolutely have been some significant breaches on the open source, but honestly, that's true of commercial too. The secret is to make sure that you've got a layered security strategy in place, which includes zero-day protection solutions that incorporate virtual patching for the open source databases that you're looking at. Obviously, security is essential, and we want you, whether it's commercial or open source, to be safe. Now, performance is a never-ending issue. But again, a dependence on the community might be slow or even frustrating at times. There are solutions and services which can keep you up to date on performance issues before they become a problem, or services, support services, which will help you with your performance support and issues that you have. Now, of course, last but not least, are the support of the resources. Do you have the appropriate resources to take on an open source database? And some of you already may be on open source, or some of you may be thinking about it. And, you know, do you have the time to learn the new systems? Or do you have the ability, the financial ability to hire the resources which already have those appropriate skills? There's a lot of similarity to maybe something you might be used to, but that doesn't mean it's a slam dunk either. Now, let's move on and talk about some of the trends specific to Oracle database. So 3 years ago, in 2017, Romini Street ran a survey to try to shed some light on some previously undisclosed truths about Oracle database. And we recently conducted a follow-up study to that survey, which included 237 respondents and over 18 countries. So a nice international flavor to this. And the survey had some diverse respondents, including C-level folks, DBAs, managers, architects. And what I want to do is to walk you through the 5 key findings as it's going to be relayed in an ebook that's coming out actually later this week, and we'll make sure that you get, everybody on this will get a copy of that. So here's our key finding, our insight number 1. 3/4 of the respondents have more than 10 Oracle database instances, and that's pretty much the same number that we had last survey in 2017, but those with more than 100 instances trended up slightly from up 7% from the 2017 survey. Now, with the growing reliance on the data, it's not a surprise that the percentage of businesses with instances have increased slightly in that larger category of more than 100. And part of that is if you've got a lot of instances, it's going to be difficult both to monitor it and to maintain those databases. In fact, 68% that we'll talk a little bit more later in the survey showed that 68% are struggling to keep up with the pace of those upgrades. You've got to continue to support older database releases while managing costs and difficulty of the upgrades. They are expensive and disruptive. Plus, you've got issues that we'll talk about in a second around having specific older releases if you don't do the upgrades. So we'll talk about that in insight number 2. Now, in a 2019 IOUG survey, a user group for Oracle showed some similar results, about 83% reporting more than 10 databases. Now, moving on to insight number 2, key finding number 2. 67% of the respondents either have database instances that are no longer going to be fully supported, or that are no longer fully supported by Oracle, or as of December 2020 aren't going to be fully supported. Guess what? That's only 3 months away, folks, right? Or that they don't know. Now, what happens here is pretty important, because for organizations that have database instances in sustaining support, or going to be in sustaining support by the end of the year, according to Oracle's lifetime support policy, they're no longer going to receive new updates, new fixes, security alerts, data fixes, critical patch updates, all the stuff that you're typically paying probably somewhere around 22% for. And to be specific, Oracle Database 11.1 and prior releases are already in sustaining support, and 11.2 is going to enter Oracle sustaining support in December 2020. And 12.2.0.1 will enter sustaining support at the end of November 2020. Though Oracle has announced a correction policy until 2022, March of 2022, but that only covers Severity 1 fixes and security. Now, so when you look at that and the fact that you've got such a large percentage, you've got to take a look at your own landscape here. And you're paying 22% of your fees for virtually no support, only old fixes, files and patches, and no security. This is, in fact, underscored by a response from folks that 97% of our survey felt that high cost of Oracle is a key challenge. Now, this is compounded with the confusion with 25%, over a quarter, weren't even really sure what will or won't be supported when full support ends in December 2020. So, is sustaining support? Yes, Oracle will tell you yes, but is it really support as far as what you need? That's a different question. And that poses a security risk, because 42% of our respondents said that's one of their top challenges, applying the patches and the costs associated in the effort to do that. So moving on to number 3, this might not be a huge shocker to folks, but 83% feel that support costs from Oracle on their Oracle database are excessive, or they're at least paying too much for Oracle database. Now, that's up significantly from 3 years ago by about 16%. And since then, we think that changes in licensing fees and support fees have also spiked as a problem. So respondents just are feeling overcharged. And amid these rising costs and squeezed budgets of COVID-19 and limited resources, companies are absolutely looking for better and more cost-efficient alternatives. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second as well. Now, we talked about cost. Now we're going to talk about value, which has cost as a component. So are you getting anything for what you're paying? 73% of folks don't feel they're getting enough valuable database enhancements from Oracle. And more than a quarter, this is kind of crazy, don't feel they're getting any valuable Oracle database enhancements, at least not valuable to them. So despite paying some significant annual support fees, they don't, companies don't feel that they're really getting what they deserve on their enhancement investments. Additionally, since cost is related to value, once again, that 97% of our respondents citing the high cost as a key challenge. Now, again, if you're finding it hard to that 68% to stay current on your latest releases, you could be vulnerable to some security risks. And without the critical patch updates, unless you have other security mitigation strategies like virtual patching being deployed, you're going to be at risk. And the problem is, if you're following Oracle's vendor-driven roadmap and upgrading simply to stay supported without attaining the value that you really deserve out of these upgrades, it's wasting budget, and those resources could be better deployed on innovation or digital transformation within your organization. And let me remind you, feel free to pop a question into the Q&A list if you've got any questions throughout the presentation. We'll address those as we get to the close here. So here's key to finding number 5. And this is incredible. So 3 years ago, we had 8% of our survey respondents saying that they were looking to reduce, they're actively looking to reduce their Oracle database footprint. That has exploded 5 times to 41%. Pretty significant. And part of that is, I think, that the database market has become increasingly commoditized with those 340 plus databases available across commercial, open source, and cloud alternatives. But and cost is unquestionably the #1 factor as a motivation to reduce that footprint. But they also identified some support-related quality issues, license compliance, technical, relationship issues, slow development, and the functionality as some of the reasons for reducing the Oracle footprint. Great example, and this is sort of all ties things together. License compliance issues are typically a friction point. It generates revenue for Oracle, increasing the cost, and then it also affects the relationship with the vendor. And because Oracle's support process can be difficult to navigate, more than half found that they resolved the majority of Oracle database issues on their own without Oracle, or they're at least not sure how much time they're giving of their own, of self-support, because they are not maybe overly impressed or don't want to navigate the labyrinth of the Oracle support process. So generally, organizations are looking at open source and non-Oracle cloud databases for a lot of reasons, including to reduce costs, to speed time to results, so because they've got more nimble, more agile databases that they can spin up, and to avoid those license compliance issues. So keeping with the industry trends, the respondents are considering, planning, or already have adding open source or non-cloud options at 69%, which is a fairly good-sized jump of 23%, versus 3 years ago. Now, of those, about 1/3, 35%, are specifically considering open source databases, which, I mentioned this earlier, the most popular options were MySQL, Postgres, and MongoDB. So what's all this mean? We've got a few recommendations here that we would suggest people take a look at when it comes to your Oracle database and the strategies. We've asked people, what are they doing? And the first one is really understand the value of your current annual spend. So, review the releases you've got and understand what's not going to be fully supported by the end of this year in 3 months. And then look at the ROI on the annual maintenance and support fees, including the cost to upgrade those instances which aren't fully supported right now, so that you could stay fully supported with Oracle. And if you find that you're continuing to spend more while getting really not the enhancements that you need, you've got to look at the alternatives, and we'll talk about those in a second as well. Certainly, it seems like most everybody is at least researching more nimble and cost-effective cloud and open source databases. And you've got, not in addition to Postgres and MySQL, you've got Amazon and the cloud. Look at these for the newer IT projects at least, so you can do some experimentation, and then consider the appropriate strategies to migrate any existing databases to open source for lower cost. Now, it's not a given that you should or could, but at least you may want to take a look at that. And then you also want to look at other support options to reduce costs and improve the service. So for those databases that you can't move, for ERP applications like SAP, EBS, BD Edwards, PeopleSoft, just to name a few. You're not going to move off of those, at least not from Oracle database. EBS, as example, it only runs on Oracle database. PeopleSoft, you have a couple of options, but not open source. And then lastly, make sure that you're following a business-driven roadmap and not a vendor-dictated path. So evaluate, the end of full support for Oracle database, how that's going to impact what money and resources you're going to have for other projects, or maybe it's just simply the bottom line, lately today, and the required upgrades that you're going to need to do to maintain the full support, and consider whether it makes sense for you to continue to pay those excessive fees for nominal support, or whether or not you should explore some support options like third-party support with Romini Street to either drop to the bottom line, invest in innovation, or what can we help you with so that you don't even have to worry about moving off of Oracle, especially if you have resource constraints, particularly right now. So with that, we've got a number of questions to go through. I'm going to cover those, but we are going to send out, as I show here on this slide, these top 5 key findings of the survey. And we also have, and you'll be getting a copy of these slides, some related webinars, some of the hidden costs around Oracle database security patches, as well as 5 ways to come out ahead on a software audit. So with that, let's take a look at what questions we have right now. So George has asked, do you have survey data for Oracle support efficiency? Well, I think there's a number of issues that efficiency could fall into. Certainly, one of the things that I'll give you an example. With Romini Street, we have a 10-minute SLA for critical issues, P1 issues. So we will respond within 10 minutes. And our response time is actually on average less than 5 minutes. So we have, and there's always a different kind of an overlap period when customers move to our support, where they could call Romini Street and Oracle at the same time. And we've actually solved problems for customers before Oracle has even responded to them to ask, what's up? How can I help? So I don't have any specific numbers from the survey data on efficiency. only the fact that people in general are fairly, let's say, less than satisfied with it. And I think part of that is you can tell through that over half show, and I think it was 55%, that half of folks are doing the resolving issues on their own before they even call Oracle because they know it's going to be faster and simpler. We take a different approach where we take full responsibility, we're quick, we become part of your team, and so we want you to offload to us. Oracle would prefer you solve it yourself, so there's more profit for them. Okay, Jim, you're asking, I work for a bank. I've always been told that Romini Street did not provide all the Oracle patches, PSUs, zero-day security patches in order to stay compliant. All right, so Jim, great question. We get this all the time. We have many banks, nuclear facilities, Department of Defense out there that have relied on Romini Street both for our support and our assistance around security. And we have solutions, zero-day solutions that will actually make it safer. The problem with many of, most of our customers, let's put the vast majority of customers that we encounter, is that there are, most customers do not patch when they should. And if you could patch all your Oracle CPUs immediately, on time, every time, you'd be in pretty good shape. But the fact is, people don't. Why? Well, because of the regression testing that's required, the system downtime that's required. If you go down even for a few minutes, it could be costing your company millions of dollars. Instead, we look at a virtual patching solution that will allow folks to stay compliant. And we are happy to provide references of customers. For database, we actually leverage its enhanced, our Romini Street Advanced Database Security is enhanced with technology from McAfee, certainly a really strong name. And we do protect against zero-day, what's called CWEs, whereas Oracle does not. They go in and they patch for specific items, and remember, they don't patch anything that's in sustaining support. So it's a great question. We'd love to engage with you more fully with our security experts. All right. So I've got a few more questions here. These were some that came in already from the registration. So please, again, keep going with your questions in the chat box while I go through this, because we've got another 10 minutes or so. Let's see. So Chirag is asking, what all applications such as ERP, Agile, et cetera, are certified on open source databases? So many are not certified. Specifically the major ERPs from Oracle and SAP, as I just mentioned. You're not going to be able to go to open source for those. Things like Agile Product Lifecycle Management and some of the other, most of the other Oracle applications that we support, they don't run on open source. So, what we're suggesting is that you take a look at some other components in your enterprise, or if you're building something. We have built some of our own internal applications, and we've used open source on the Romini Street side. You've got to make sure, Chirag also asked pros and cons. I mentioned before, pros is it's low cost, but the cons could be the lack of skills and experience that you have, the ability to be able to get answers and support when you need them, unless you contract with an open source support provider. Let's see. Douglas, I'm interested in other options, taking our Oracle database footprint and doing the same with other viable options, particularly areas like hardware. So we have a client on the cloud side who was stretched for cash. They were particularly, they didn't have in the budget to improve their hardware, and they wanted a better disaster recovery system. So what they did was they moved to an independent cloud provider and were able to, boom, in an instant, get all new hardware, get a new disaster recovery program, and alongside of that, they moved all of that, what would have been CapEx, into an OpEx category, which they could handle. Now, Romini Street has a cloud advisory services where we work with customers, with our clients, to help them move to the cloud, to make recommendations, and provide them with connections with companies that we know are pretty reputable. And there's a lot of them out there, but there's also some that are maybe, let's say, not quite as strong, and we'll give you some indications of that as well. Okay, let's see. What else do we have here? Mikhail, what's unique in Romini's database support offering? Great question. So, a couple of things. First of all, with Oracle standard support, performance support is not really included. If you have the need for improving things, we've run across customers that were told, okay, well, you need to buy $500,000 worth of Exadata machines, and that'll improve your performance. Well, you know, we took a look at that, and we said, now that it might nominally improve performance, but what we do is we center in on the root cause. And we were able to come up with a solution that was vastly superior, improved their performance immensely without the additional cost of $500 million or $500,000, excuse me. Another part of our support process is the fact that we have a primary support engineer. When you call into Oracle, you're getting a typically junior level, book trained kind of engineer, and when you get them, you can hear them furiously typing some keywords in to cross their fingers, hope, pray maybe that there'll be an answer to your question. And frequently, you get a couple of answers that are pretty common. Oh, you need to upgrade or apply this patch. Well, that's expensive to do those. Or it's a problem with your customization. Now, this doesn't necessarily apply to database, but for applications, you frequently get it's a customization problem. So it's, in fact, your problem. What we do is we put people with an average of 15 years of experience on the phone. You get their name, their cell phone number. You can log a ticket through the Romini Street portal, or you can call your PSE or primary support engineer directly. Now, they're backed up by a tremendous staff of other engineers who have maybe expertise in one particular area. For instance, we have folks that are maybe more experienced in Oracle database running on Exadata, for example. Others in other areas. So they have this backup, but what it means is we can get to the root cause of your problem. That's essential, because frequently a patch may not work, or it may cause more problems than it was worth. It may cause other problems, break other things. But it's a tremendous resource, and they become, the PSE, a part of your team, not just some unknown voice over the phone who really is going to have to escalate a more sophisticated problem, and then you got to explain it all over, and you're spending hours on the phone just trying to get to somebody who hopefully could help you. And again, that's why people are solving their own problems. Let's see, was there another part of your question, Mikhail? Oh, okay. So, yes. And that's just a little bit of the answer. There's a lot more that we can talk about, but I don't want to belabor the point. If my database is fully cloud-based, can I still get third-party support? Absolutely, yes. We have quite a few customers who are using a cloud-based application or database. So, we work very well with many of the cloud providers out there. And like I say, we have our own cloud advisory services. And that's a no-charge service to all, well, sorry, it's no additional charge to our existing client base. Oh, and you know what? I forgot to mention the most unique thing about our database support offering is it's a 50% discount off of the Oracle maintenance fee. So whatever you're paying $500,000, boom, day one it becomes $250,000 with Romini Street. That was a silly one for me to forget about. So all right, so keep the questions coming in. This is great. Okay, Aparo asks, what's your normal turnaround time on service requests? What makes you equal or better than Oracle support when Oracle is relying on massive knowledge base of issues several magnitudes larger than Romini Street? Okay, I think I answered most of that in the previous question. Again, it's on a critical issue, it's less than 5 minutes, typically, with an SLA of 10 minutes. And for P2 issue, which is a huge number of our tickets, our SLA on that is 15 minutes. Now, I think I talked a little bit about some of the other differentiators, but we have, the big thing is that PSE. First line, these are folks who know Oracle database inside and out. In that 5 minutes that you get the phone call answered, they actually may be able to give you the solution that you're looking for. Or it may take a little bit longer, and I'd love to go into, if I had time, some of the myriad of cases that we solve for Oracle database. But it's important to know that these are folks that have got dirt under their fingernails. They've implemented Oracle database. They have upgraded Oracle database. You're not talking to a person that really has no knowledge of what's going on and have never actually done any of the things that you're talking about. We have probably hundreds of cases where we were able to solve problems that Oracle couldn't, or it's had on their plate for a year, and then within a month after coming on board, a customer turns around, our customer has given us when they come on board, and within a month we've got a problem solved that Oracle spent, years, year plus on, and it still never were able to solve the problem. So there's a couple other questions that I won't be able to, well, let me see if I can squeeze in one more question. Okay, Felicia asks, who's the leading providers? I think I've covered that already. Ray, current adoption rate for non-Oracle databases. Well, I didn't actually plot the curve, but you can see, well, it might be flattening out a little bit recently, simply because the fact that there are no, or the numbers are getting bigger. It's pretty much in popularity approaching equality with the commercial databases. And Ray also asked, how do we save money? Well, okay. I mean, we've got ways that we can help you either move to a cloud provider. There's money savings in that potentially. We can, you might look at the open source, or simply go to Romini Street for your Oracle, Microsoft, or IBM or SAP database support. Let's see, Chandra, in the near future, will ERPs support open source databases? I don't think you're going to see that from Oracle or SAP in the near future. They have a lot of money invested in their particular products. You may see that with some of the second or third tier ERPs. In fact, I believe Lawson is building currently or has one right now that, sorry, not Lawson, could be Infor. Infor or Lawson are building for an open source database, but I don't think you're going to see it from Oracle or SAP. And let's see, Diego's asking, doesn't Oracle provide support in a vacuum where Romini Street leverages interoperability support? That's actually very true. Some products, some issues, Oracle can't address at all, or the answer is, especially around interoperability, you'll need to upgrade to the latest and greatest. We have an entire department called Advanced Technology Services that work with customers to allow them to maximize the ROI that they have with their existing solution, whether it's databases or applications. And we have other solutions and software that helps them continue to work as the environment around them evolves. So it's really pretty fascinating from that standpoint. Great example, doesn't necessarily apply to databases today, but everybody on this call, if you've got any kind of older version of Oracle or SAP ERP or some of the other enterprise applications, you're going to have a problem with browser support. Browsers are changing every 6 to 8 weeks. Romini Street has a patented solution that's very inexpensive that sits between your web server and your application that allows you to use any browser and any version of any browser. So when Chrome changes in 6 weeks from now, it's working fine today, but in 6 weeks it doesn't, we have a solution for that. In fact, most EBS users, everybody who's not on 12.2, so 12.1 and earlier, are stuck with Internet Explorer 11. You don't have to be stuck with that. You can use Chrome, you can use Opera, anything you want with the Romini Street solution. So our interoperability is a tremendous asset, that support in order to help folks continue to maximize what they've got instead of being forced to upgrade by the vendor. So with that, I think we've kind of run over on time here, just a few minutes. We really appreciate everyone's attention and questions. It's been some great questions, and I hope that you've gotten everything that you wanted out of this. If you'd like to talk to us and would like to get more information, clientservices@roministreet.com. So thank you very much and have a great rest of the day.